This 1.6 gigahertz radio frequency that's happening. Can you further explain that to me, somebody that does not have knowledge of radio frequency? It seems like every time you do something, this frequency is occurring.
I think I
What do you
just
make of
saw
that?
Thomas scoot away from the table.
This is out of my wheelhouse. This is a total Erik question.
Okay, yes, I'll address this because this is in fact something that comes up very often, and actually, I appreciate the question. It hadn't occurred to me that this might be worth talking about, but it is not the fact that we see a peak in the spectrum at or near 1.6 gigahertz. First of all, it isn't exactly 1.6 gigahertz. And we fully understand that this is a region of the electromagnetic spectrum where we do have what we would call traffic, there are things that operate in that space, things that we know about, including satellite communications and so forth. What is interesting to us is when we see what I would call badly behaved signals that don't stay in their lane. So imagine you've got a series of well-defined peaks across a range of the RF spectrum. I typically stream through the live stream a portion of that electromagnetic spectrum from 1.3 up to 1.9 gigahertz, and we see a regular pattern of signals that occupy that space. But what we're looking for are those instances where we see a peak that doesn't obey the conventional rules. It's moving around. It's not staying in its lane. That's the sort of thing that gets our attention. There's another thing that happens in that region that's worth talking about, and that is when the entire noise floor, think of it as the low-level static, if you will, when the entire noise floor jumps up as if it has been, every frequency across that domain has suddenly been emitted by something. Those are the kinds of events that interest us and, quite frankly, concern us.
What could be causing them?
I've heard Travis exclaim, "There's not a technology on Earth that can do that." I wish he were here in this conversation because I'm sure he could add a lot to this. It was, in fact, you may remember when we were exploring one of these cavities in the mesa. We call it the swimmy-headed hole. It's kind of like a cave. We were exploring that and looking at an airflow that was seeming to come out of what may be a natural duct in this opening. Travis experienced some symptoms. He talked about being kind of lightheaded, or as he says, swimmy-headed up there. And it was in that very same exercise, that same time frame, that one of the visiting members of our team, who was a geologist, noticed that on a handheld spectrum analyzer, he was seeing a very strong peak right in that range, that 1.6 gigahertz range. And I think that's what really turned our attention to this 1.6-ish gigahertz signal. And it kept coming up again and again and again in our work. So I don't want people to get the impression that we are running around with our hair on fire because we see signals in that range. We know there are signals in that range. It's the particular character of those signals that interest us. And I'll tell you, from having watched the RF spectrum all the way down into the kilohertz range and up into the 6 gigahertz and beyond, there are lots of places where I see signals that seem to be very strangely behaved, and I don't have a good explanation for that behavior.
Mm-hmm. Wild. I'm just dying to know what's causing it all. I know you guys are too. And Erik, you seem to definitely rely heavily on I'm not going to jump to any conclusions until I have full answers. But Thomas, what do you think is buried under those rocks?
Are you talking about in the mesa where we put the metal?
Yes. Yes.